Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jess and John pod. I'm Jess.
And I'm John. Hi, everybody. It's been a minute, but we're here. We're back.
It's been a minute. John has been dealing with some flooding in the Ohio Valley of the state of West Virginia.
That is correct. Way to get the geographical area right. It's a weird part of the country, but yeah, we have had, and we'll get into this, but climate disasters wherever you are, you watch them happen in the news, just like we did, and then all of a sudden you're in the climate disaster. So I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, it's weird when it comes to where you live. And you've been doing mutual aid. I think when it hits home and you're in a position to like get more people on board, you just go into that mode of like organizing for your community. I want you to say for the listeners of the Jess and John pod what the mutual aid has been.
Oh man, yeah, let's get into that because it's been really nothing short of incredible here. Just for information on this flood, Wheeling, West Virginia, specifically Triadelphia, got hit with, so the 1,000-year rainfall record is like 2.2 inches in a half an hour. We got 4, so nearly double the 1,000-year rainfall event in a single day. This comes after, some of you may have watched, I did a piece with More Perfect Union maybe six weeks or 2 months ago about catastrophic flooding that hit the southern part of the state. That flood killed a number of people in Kentucky, a few in West Virginia. 6 weeks later, this flood hits my own hometown. And so far, I mean, it was really tragic. So far, we have 9 people confirmed dead. They fished 80 cars out of the local creek. You know, this is just a creek that's flowing by Kroger. You can get in it and float down it. But just because of the geography and the rainfall, it was absolutely tragic. So before this hit, and this is really a reason for anybody out there to start setting up your mutual aid networks now. Mutual aid is just neighbors helping neighbors. It can be, and ours was, extremely simple. People who go to the bar together, people who take trips together, people who live on your block in their circle of friends. We started getting together and having regular meetings, seeing the different ways that we could help each other. There's a difference between charity and mutual aid. Mutual aid is about solidarity, people in the group helping other folks in the group and their circles, not just formalized nonprofits raising large amounts of money and then finding, making a decision about who is worthy and less worthy and handing it out that way. That's not what this is. This is neighbors helping neighbors in an organized way. So before this flood, we simply got together the people that we knew and we started doing that. We helped some members out with utility assistance. We got a really awesome program going, the community kitchen, that I benefit from a ton. We found a church who was willing to lend out their basement. The group of us in mutual aid get together on Mondays. We cook a meal. We all leave with the meal. We pitch into it. It's a easy, healthy way to have like community building, friendship. You leave with a meal. It's cheap. It's healthy. It's great. We set up a structure that was pretty easy to raise money. Shout out to Blue Jay Rising, by the way. That is an organization run by Zach Shrewsbury and Brandy Reese in West Virginia that has been really excellent in mutual aid after the flooding the state's impacted. They gave us a system to field money, and we had that in place before this flood hit. When the flood hit, we ended up raising so far, I won't share the public numbers, but a really significant amount of money for the community that's helping us do disaster relief. We have gotten close to and may have passed 1,000 volunteer shifts in the week and a half since this flood happened. Our group, which was just neighbors helping neighbors, is now coordinating with FEMA and the federal government. It was quick, direct, nimble. We've cleaned out probably 300 homes that were devastated. We're talking about running a grant program where you come in here and you get a flat grant that's going to help out with whatever needs that you have that doesn't have strings attached. It's putting money directly in people's hands. The point is, I have to give, I was behind the scenes in a lot of this. I was there when the meeting started. We helped set up a lot of things. But because we were doing that, we were meeting, we were getting people prepared for situations like this, the response in Wheeling, West Virginia, of my friends that I know who have stepped up from doing, very minor things when it came to mutual aid things to completely running a disaster relief organization, that watching that process is one of the only things that gives me hope in this political landscape when it comes to flood relief. I mean, we're in a situation where it is only us who is going to save us. We can't be waiting around on saviors. FEMA is getting cut. They are directly, in ways that you can see and point to, both leading us into a climate crisis and leaving us on our own. You watch these things in the news and you think that's not going to be me. I was like that. It happened in my town. And the only reason I am not absolutely despondent is because we started a mutual aid thing. We gave people in this town, who, by the way, don't have a ton of time and money to do this, but stepped up and did it anyway. I cannot say enough that our listeners, wherever you are, you should start your mutual aid group. It's going to give you hope. It's going to give you purpose. And it is going to save your ass in a climate disaster whenever it reaches your doorstep. So all the credit to Ohio Valley Mutual Aid and the people who have been leading this flood response. You can find our Instagram page and Facebook. You should check us out. And if you've got a couple of dollars, help us keep going. But more importantly, start your mutual aid group now. Get in touch with your friends, put them in a group chat, set a regular meeting, find out what needs you have in that group, and just go from there. We didn't have any expertise or permission or anything. We just did it, and it really paid off when a flood came.
It's interesting. I think so much about what you just said of like, they're putting us in a position where we're on our own to protect against this extreme weather that is the result of them wanting to rely on fossil fuels. We have enough manpower, we have enough technology to live in a way where we have clean energy and it's sustainable. And the fact that we don't is a choice. It's largely a choice of the people with capital, the people in power, whatever. But like, mutual aid seems to be the only path forward. Like when Hurricane Helene hit, beloved Asheville was the network with on the ground knowledge of where things can go to get to people. And I think without something like that, it becomes near impossible to have a reasonable, organized response to huge disasters. It seems that there's just this belief of like, we have to be preppers and like spend our own private dollars to individually protect ourselves, as insurance companies are no longer providing protection in these areas. And so premiums are going up tremendously. And people won't be able to afford insurance if your home is uninsurable because, one, you can't pay, or two, because they decide they're not going to cover it. You can't have a home loan. Like, you can't finance. That leaves so many more people as permanent renters. Also, what does that mean for the housing market and banks? Like, we're reaching a point where climate disasters can force collapses in the banking industry, the people who give out mortgages. And like, if a home is destroyed in a flood and the insurance company is not paying out, what do you do? Like, the bank is going to have a massive loss. And a lot of these frontline communities are not people who can afford to self-insure. So this is going to be a really crazy situation. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, especially with the increased amount of flooding going on. I don't have an answer for it, but I think it's something more people need to worry about. And I think there's a reason why it's not getting covered, because no one wants to cause people to make decisions in anticipation of disaster in the economy, because that creates its own sort of mini economic collapse. So yeah, I think it's worth talking about, though, so we can prepare as people, not as investors, because
it does feel like we're heading into a world with the tools of a world that recently died, Like, we are headed into a climate disaster world as, FEMA, which was never really adequate, is being cut away. As like the next level down for people to rely on is just kind of a bureaucratic web of nonprofits that are not really nimble and have a lot of like means testing around them. And all I can say from living through this is that it really never underestimate what a small group of the people that you know can accomplish just by getting together, being organized, knowing each other, and talking through this. There's no way to put it into words. I mean, you can check out some of the stuff that we're doing on Ohio Valley Mutual Aid's socials, but just seeing the community step up to save itself, because nobody's going to save us, I cannot stress the importance of that enough as we all, go into the crazy world that you see on your screens every day. It's never been more mask off than it is right now. And the other thing is, like, it doesn't have to be doom and gloom. Like, it's kind of weird to find community in a disaster, but man, getting together and feeling the strength of your community is something that everybody should experience. And I think until you do that, you might not know what you're missing. And it definitely helps when the news and everything is crazy. So go out and start your mutual aid chapter, read up on it. It does not have to be complicated, and you don't need to wait.
Yeah, I think there's two options of response when something like this happens, especially in Appalachia, where you have mountain people who are built different and like don't want to leave their land. There was a huge thing that happened by where my parents live, where there are so many people that thought the government created the storm on purpose to get people to leave their land because there was minerals in the mountain they wanted. And so they stayed isolated with like no food because they thought they needed to protect their land. Like, working people want to protect the little that they have, that they've scraped together. And so like mutual aid creates this scenario where instead of this like individualist thing of I'm so tough and I'm going to protect this, there's a different way to be that kind of person, to be like prideful that like, no, we take care of our own, And I think the cultural response is really important to like encourage the latter.
Totally. And who wants to be like stockpiling, tubs of Costco mac and cheese and a bunch of guns and ham radios alone? It's not, that is much more fun when you do that together.
Yeah.
The strength of any individual preparing for whatever is ahead is just never going to rise to the level of doing that with the people who are around you. And when you give a little lead time before a disaster hits, that's invaluable. But then after this disaster, like we have got a ton of assets that came in here, tools, dehumidifiers, all this stuff. We're starting a tool library because of that. So we're ready for the next one. We're ready when somebody has a water line break, and it's mutual aid people that are going to be there, who know you, who know what you need, who are going to give that to you at either free or the lowest cost possible. And that's compared to, contractors who price gouge in disasters. We have to get away from that model and build a different one.
Yeah, I will say, if you were looking for the Jess and John pod and it didn't come out and you're upset by it, this was happening. And a part of the reason why I thought we were good partners to work together when we started this show is like, we're both the type of people that like walk the walk. We're not just like, oh, people should have nice things and be taken care of. Like, we both are the type of people to be in our communities and be helping and be hands-on and doing things. It does mean when disasters happen, we're not going to prioritize getting on and yapping about the news. But also there's been some travel going on as recently as last week. John and I were both in New York. I was there for a wedding. He was there for the Emmys. And John, congratulations. Do you want to tell them?
We won an Emmy, people. We were emanated for a Nommy, and we nommied that Emmy.
Yes. Okay, I don't even know what to ask first. Let's start with the story that you covered that won the Emmy.
First off, I do want to just lead with a shout out to the team. This was More Perfect Union. The whole newsroom is involved with this, but especially Nehemiah Stark, my ride or die cameraman, producer, Josh Hirschfeld Crowan, Court Fuller, Meg Hirschline, Josh Miller Lewis. So many people go into producing these pieces, and I'm very thankful for them. So this one was about, and I was very proud because this was an Appalachian piece. It was about Elliott County, Kentucky. It's the only county in America. This is in the eastern coalfields, heart of Appalachia. The only county in America that voted 144 years straight in a row for Democrats. That's Obama twice, by the way. This is a county that is 99% white. 144 years for Democrats before a dramatic flip to Donald Trump by one of the biggest margins anywhere, and then doubling down on voting for Trump again. So we went to investigate what, and just talk to ordinary working class people about what was going, what's behind that big of a transition. And this is a running theme of our piece. But we have a lot of conversations that are unexpected. Whenever you put it up on YouTube, the comment section is always kind of in disbelief, because we had a character we met, and the county seat of this county is 600 people. Everybody knows each other. And we were talking to a woman that was way out there, living in a trailer complex, raising like beef cattle and cutting hay in the middle of the heat dome when we filmed this to feed her 5 kids. And she is way bought into Trump, but we're having a discussion about why that is. And we eventually get to a point, my co-producer Neems asked the question, do you have more in common with a migrant who crossed the border illegally than you do with Donald Trump? And she says, yes, absolutely. I have more in common with a migrant who crossed illegally than with Donald Trump, because me and this migrant are both doing what we're doing to try to survive and feed our kids. And so we go to these places and we just talk to people, which weirdly is a thing that doesn't really happen with legacy corporate media that's really focused on sound bites, that's really focused on feeding people blue and red division. And that's not speaking to what we are constantly finding when we go out into Appalachia or other places and have conversations with people about what they want politically. No matter who you vote for, people know that we are living in a system where the voices of ordinary people do not compare to the control of billionaires, right? We're talking to a guy who's running a gas station who is saying, like, I do not like Walmart, I do not like Amazon. All of these people, no matter what party they come from, seem to be doing the same thing. And when that's the case, and somebody like Donald Trump comes along that all of those people hate, and he doesn't fit into the picture. To a lot of folks, he's the only one speaking to an anti-establishment vibe. And what we try to do is show that the really strong anti-establishment wave that is in the hearts of a lot of people across this country is not being spoken to by the left end of the political spectrum, and especially by the corporate Democrats who run and control the direction of the only other opposition party that we have. So we're going there and we're showing, hey, there's an appetite for rolling back the power of billionaires. There is an appetite. People want healthcare, actually. They want public services. They want their towns to be nice. They want to have internet and roads and transportation and housing. But they know that a corporate establishment is standing in the way and is charging them for all of those things. But in our political conversation, that is the boundaries of which are set by legacy newsrooms, there's not a lot of room to talk about what that would look like from someone like Bernie Sanders or Zohran or anybody who's not the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. I'm going to end my rant there, but that's a running theme through all of our work.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like the story that's told in mainstream media of where the country is divided and what each side believes doesn't match up with the evidence of people's everyday lives of what they believe, what their neighbors believe. And like, It is fascinating that by going and talking to people in Elliott County, the folks at the Emmys are like, wow, groundbreaking. So what was it like being there as like a second time Emmy nom?
Yeah, we got nominated for East Palestine coverage. We lost on that one. I really did not expect to win on this one because we're a small newsroom with half the people and way more than half the budget of these, household names. Yeah, CBS, MSNBC, NBC, the New York Times, Washington Post, all of this. So it was a shock to win. I was preemptively consuming beverages, so when I got up there, it was after a week of flood relief, and I didn't know we were going to win. So I looked a little bit hot and sweaty and drunk up there, but you know what? That's all right. Or wear that with pride. I think I'm very honored to win this award. What it's like to actually be in that room, though. A lot of these awards ceremonies are kind of circular backslapping for media. And a critique, there are plenty of pieces in there that deserve to be in that room, no doubt. But if you're looking for something to critique broadly in media that's represented in the Emmys room, I would say a lot of it glorifies it's kind of entertainment journalism. It's glorifying the people who are on camera. And a lot of the times I would say it misses a sharp point that points out who has the power and how they're using it to their own benefit. And instead of doing that, kind of glorifies this like heroic journalism, intrepid people going into a cave where they're cooking fentanyl, but missing the point of pharma companies who fund the newsrooms who benefit from creating a demand for the fentanyl. You know what I mean? That's just kind of an example that I think other media has to be aware of, and what we at More Perfect Union try to have as our foundation, which is really understanding and encouraging a discussion between working class people, no matter who they voted for, because our interests have always been the same, and it's never been more clear that the division is not red and blue or left and right. It's people who have to go to work in the morning versus people who own the place where you go into in the morning and who also are controlling our government and amassing enormous amounts of wealth. So I'm happy that this one time the plucky little newsroom pulled it off. Feel lucky for that, and encourage other journalists whose work we do rely on, but to never lose focus of the balance of power between the working class and the people with more money than God.
It's so weird because a part of me is like, that's what journalism's supposed to be, naturally. It's supposed to be questioning and exposing of power. But then I think about like the origins of a lot of the newspapers in the United States and like William Randolph Hearst being a guy that was so invested in American imperialism and like push propaganda in his papers on purpose. It's just like, is it true that's the real origin and purpose of journalism? Like, are we insurgents into what was created and developed as just a means of control for the ruling class? I think about all of these things so much, and it's interesting that, what does it mean when someone like you and a piece like this wins an Emmy? Did it penetrate, or is something changing and going towards this direction? Like, I just want to assign meaning to it so badly. And
Yeah.
like learn something about the world from it. But in any case, it's a good recognition that you're doing really good work and really good journalism, and like people are paying attention, and it does matter even to the old guard.
And did the whole thing in jorts, baby. So if you're sitting out there thinking about how do you produce stuff that gets recognized by a lot of these Emmys in the crew that like participates in that culture, you can do it in jorts. You can, I kind of, it's kind of an intentional choice. I think like professionalism generally functions a lot of the time as like an artificial gatekeeping thing. Like you're not allowed to comment on the state of politics unless you wear this suit. and if you put that on, then you're in a class of people, and the people you talk about are out there. But I think for the way that our problems are going and our politics is going, we need a lot more people who are not just conforming to professional standards, that edit the truth that you might want to talk about so that it fits nicely into a suit. I think if we're going to really wrestle with our problems, there needs to be a diversity of voices out there that go beyond what most of our media looks like. And that is totally possible, and a win for the jorts community that I'm happy about. And, I'd say the last thing of this whole experience is the way that media talks about politics, I think, artificially sets boundaries in the minds of the public for what is politically possible. I came into journalism after, and I say this, like, I am proudly biased. I am transparent about the bias that I have, which is in favor of working class people. And I came into doing journalistic work after working on campaigns. And what I learned from working on campaigns is that the information that reaches your eyes and your eyeballs and your ears, the information that reaches you has to run through a gauntlet of influence before it gets to you. And most of that, when it comes to political discussion and analysis, is like people in suits telling you who is electable and who is not, what is possible and what is not, what is pie in the sky and unrealistic, and all of this stuff. And the reality is nobody knows that, and I think that was a point that was on my mind at the Emmys, because the day before, Zohran Mamdani won the mayoral primary of New York City, not just by a hair, but by a whole fucking lot. And, before that happened, it was impossible by the political punditry class. Same thing with Donald Trump or Barack Obama. We always like to listen to these legacy media folks talk about what's possible, and then it almost never is accurate. So that's that on that.
Hearing you, that was put really well. Music to my earballs, John.
Thanks. You got to get those earballs tuned in, people.
Yeah, okay, so you know this, I know this, but there's this weird thing where so many people in journalism have an idea of what the story is before they go out there and find it. They know the narrative they want to tell. That's unfortunately true even in left and progressive media. It's really frustrating for anyone who approaches their work in the way that we do, which is you are responsible for telling people the truth about the world, which requires going out and finding it. And so, yeah, it feels like you have to be outside of this very regimented way of doing things. I remember being on the subway when I was in New York, like I think it was the day of the election. It was so hot, over 100 degrees. The pavement in New York makes it hotter. And there was a guy on the subway in front of me in a suit. And I remember thinking, sucks to be in a suit today. And also this weird feeling of being in normal clothes and seeing him in this uniform that's just something he's told by society he needs to wear to be respected, and feeling like it was such a big win that I didn't have to be in business clothes, in these clothes that I don't like but are socially accepted, that I became a person that doesn't put that on every day. And it sucks that some people feel like they have to provide their families and stuff, and they probably don't even like it, the ones who do it. But to be someone who like challenges norms, you do have to put yourself outside of that and be liberated every day, because there's almost something in the ritual of putting that on that you feel a part of the system. It's very tribalistic in a weird way, like the feeling of doing it. I had to wear like that type of stuff when I was in grad school. We had to wear like business casual to class, which was strange. But then I felt like I belonged to something, and it definitely influenced the way that I think. And I just started making my own clothes and learning to sew. Like I made a dress for the wedding I went to.
Crazy.
And it was such a cool experience. I was like, I'm not purchasing anything. I'm using leftover materials. I'm making it exactly how I want when nothing fits right anymore. Nothing's made well anymore. And it just I don't know, there's something that coincides with, like, being the type of person that lives outside of the system in your own little ways that helps you free your mind. It sounds very hippie, very 70s. It's not a new idea, but I think you can do it in a way where, like, you find a path that's authentic to you, that's challenging of the system. Like, there is a growing, I think, counterculture right now. Um, and I don't think that, like, Zohran's win was this big thing in New York. I was expecting like a parade in the streets or something when he won. And then I
Yeah.
realized, like, it's not that. It's not like a socialist revolution in the United States of America. It's not the People's Republic of New York, even though I called it that several times while I was there. I think it's
Yes.
that he had good messaging. He talked about freeze the rent. Mayor Adams raised rents for stabilized units by 9%. Zohran has a plan to use public funding to develop 200,000 units over the next 10 years. It's affordable groceries because there are food deserts, so we're going to have publicly run grocery stores. It's all these things that he described in a really common sense, non-ideological way. And he had good branding too, like the colors were good, the font was friendly. It wasn't that like corporate consulting graphic design firm
Oh yeah.
type of a thing. We've seen that viral video where he kind of matched what you see on bodegas and the old signs around New York,
Yes.
and that made it really friendly and like homey
Genius.
feeling. So, what are your thoughts on Zoran's big win?
Oh my God. I wasn't prepared for that either, honestly. You go through
Yeah.
so many times when your hopes are dashed by
Yeah.
the people with a ton of money in the Democratic Party who dredge up characters like Cuomo and tell everybody that it's a good idea. I mean, what are you thinking? But I think I think people can. There's all this talk about authenticity, right? But people can tell when you're standing on business for them, and that's what he did. He went out there. And I think there's something to be said too for like judge a person by their enemies. Like the most powerful interest and super PACs and just all of the establishment figures from just a variety of sources were completely aligned against this guy. And those are the same folks who are uh, shoveling coal into this dumpster fire that we're all living through right now. They're all lined up against Zohran, and it's because he is talking about genuinely shifting power away from the folks who are running things now to people with, bold policies that he doesn't shy away from. Social housing policies, free transportation policies, rebuilding the public sector that we've been told just has to go away if we want the line to keep going up. Somehow smaller countries with less money than us manage to easily provide their citizens with free healthcare and housing and transportation all the time, and we're told that in the richest country on earth it's just impossible for us. He called bullshit on that, and I think a lot of people are already called bullshit in their head and finally recognized a person who was willing to stand up against these forces, and they would ride or die for the guy. We saw youth turnout numbers that were just, it never happens. And young people came out in a crazy way for Zohran. I think it's hilarious. These takes have gone around the internet a number of times, but like the postmortem and the autopsy of the Democratic Party post Donald Trump is like, oh, we got to win back. We got to win back some Trump voters. We got to win back young men. We got to get young people to vote. We have to figure out the Joe Rogan on the left. Well, Zohran did all of those things. Like, one of the things that stood out to me most was his performance in very Trumpy neighborhoods. We can't forget that New York City and every other major city took a swing to the right in important ways, even
Mm-hmm.
with women and people of color. In many significant cases, Zohran reversed that, right? And going back to the running theme through all the videos that I work on and the one that just won an Emmy, there is an appetite among people who are currently voting for Donald Trump for things like Zohran is running on. And we don't know how people are going to respond to that if we had a wave of people like this running. We are told by legacy media that it will never materialize, it cannot happen, and it's wishful thinking. And yet, when it does happen, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie and AOC are drawing people out to fight the oligarchy tour. Zohran Mamdani, a Muslim socialist who stood against the apartheid policies of Israel, just won by double digits over Andrew Cuomo, who had billions of dollars, right? We're told that these things can never happen, but we need to stop trusting that and go for it, because there's nothing to lose and everything to win. So I thought that was so significant for the direction. The midterms are going to be coming up. This is going to be a center of gravity that is pulling the opposition party in the right direction.
Right. I think the other thing that went really well is there was not this position of like what I'm describing as extremely lefty ideals. There wasn't a focus on identity politics. There wasn't any of what is frequently referred to in mainstream media as the far left. There was, this is common sense. This is what makes sense for working people. And I think a part of like he was able to do that because he is a deep political thinker and an ideologue, but he is understanding of regular people. So he's not going to communicate it in this weird elitist sort of professorial way. He's going to say like, what's going on right now is not working with the grocery stores. We're going to have publicly run grocery stores so that people have food. Because the way I put it when I was asked about it when he first started running, when I was on the Bulwark Network, which is like mostly never Trump Republicans, a lot of centrists, I just said, the market's failing right now. That's why we don't have grocery stores and access to food in a lot of places. Capitalism brought us a situation where New Yorkers don't have access to fresh produce. In the economic center of America, in the richest country in the world, you should have access to groceries. If we don't, that's a market failure. That means the government needs to step in and ensure people have food. And like, being able to approach the issues with common sense ideals and not going down a path of like value statements, like I believe everyone has a right to food, and debating the morality of it. It's just, what is good governance?
Yeah.
And I think that's been missing from a lot of Democratic campaigns and conversations on the left that he did really well.
Yeah. Completely. And I mean, to me, it puts a nail in the coffin of all of these people just hanging on from the Clinton years, James Carville, all of these folks who just, anytime Democrats lose big, they're like, oh, we got to be more like Republicans because they won. No, you don't. You simply don't. Okay, go out there and make an argument about why every other country is managing to do stuff that we aren't. Like, we should have that. The guy came out there and said it. He is believable. He can spell it out, and he's genuine. You got to pick a side that you're on. People can tell that he's on their side, and it won. It works at the polls, and I don't think we should overthink it or slice the data a billion different ways or put a think tank on it and feed it into a machine of nerds where it comes out the end unrecognizable. It's pretty simple. The direction of this country is much more towards Zohran than any other corporate Democrat stuff going on. And I'm just so glad that we have that win to point to for the coming wave of candidates that we need to really respond to this political situation. It's nice to have a win under the belt.
Yeah, and there's so many people with concerns that I understand, I don't agree with or hold myself, but I get it. Saying he's a populist, can populists make good policy? He has all this hope and support, but he's greatly hated by a lot of powerful people in New York City and people with means to get in the way of his policy platform getting done once he's in office. They're probably going to try to make it hell for him to be successful as mayor.
Yeah.
And that's really hard, because then what could people do with the evidence? They could say, oh, look, he couldn't get anything done. Socialism doesn't work. Stop voting for candidates like this, when really it's the sabotage of the corporate capitalist class. getting in the way of his agenda. I mean, they could pay sanitation workers and the construction companies contracted to build the housing to do a horrible job, to have all of these errors, to waste money. They will spend to no limit to make him seem ineffective as a mayor. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of that being used against people whose views tend towards us. I'm afraid of that sabotaging any real movement for working class power. But I will say this, Mamdani is a true organizer. When he was an assemblyman and the cab drivers were going on strike because Bloomberg raised the price of a taxi medallion to $1 million, Zohran went to the streets with them, went on hunger strike with them, was not eating. And cab drivers said, because an assembly member was there, we got press on what we were doing. And we were able to fight back and have a major win as cab drivers to continue to make our livelihood, to not pay $1 million for a medallion. That tells me he understands power. That's what you need to get things done. And so you don't need to be a policy wonk that understands every randomized controlled trial or means tested policy study that's been put out there. You need to understand how to get things done and challenge power when necessary to fight for working people. And because he understands power in that way and how to get real results, I do believe he's the type of guy that can wheel and deal and get things done as mayor of New York City. That's what I would say to anyone who's worried about that. And one of my friends who lives in New York said, what really matters to me, and it's a win no matter what, is that people woke up the day after this election and they had hope. Yeah. And that's, we can take that and that's good, and that makes this all worth it, even if worst case scenario plays out in November.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, I think it's so important for like listeners, the general public, anybody who follows this, to just realize that the sabotage of the super rich, just that's going to be their game plan. I mean, the election for this guy is not over yet. He's headed into a general where Andrew Cuomo's probably going to stay in. Look at Eric Adams. The last time Democrats lost big, they wanted to become more like Republicans. Eric Adams was their guy. They were like, hey, this is the model forward. He held talking points about messaging to the congressional caucus with Nancy Pelosi. They were like, Eric Adams is our guy. Well, now that guy's in cahoots with Donald Trump to like drop corruption charges right now. And it's functionally a Republican. And you have Andrew Cuomo, sexual abuser, nursing home scandal guy, dealt a handy defeat in the primary, thinking about sticking around anyway for the general. But what I wanted to go back to was the fact that when people like this threaten the power of billionaires, they will threaten to take their ball and go home. And we all need to realize that is going to, if we're ever to confront their rule and their control, that's going to be their response. Like, look at what they were doing before he won. All of these billionaires were like, "Oh, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. You don't want me in New York City? I'll go down to Miami." But let's stop and think about what they're really saying to all of us. They're saying that if you don't submit to the way the world is right now, with us in control, where you have no health care, where you're going to work for longer hours and getting less pay, where 6 in 10 people are living paycheck to paycheck, where we're flooring it into a climate crisis, where our corruption is on open display in a million different ways, where we talk out of both sides of our mouth about not getting into another war and then bombing around. What they're saying is, if we don't accept that they'll just pull out and try to wreck all of society. They're saying it's you let us rule and you like it or else. And I think it's kind of that's what we saw in this election. And that will be the response as we all try to figure out a way where we actually have control over our government and not a small elite, where we actually have control over the places that we work and not just some corporate boss telling us what we have to do. Whenever we get away from that, the response is going to be billionaires are going to try to take their ball, go home and wreck everything for us. And we don't have to listen to it,
And there's so many layers to the white supremacist response to Zohran. It's so weird because Trump is praising Mayor Eric Adams, who is Black, but I do see the whole fight against immigrants as something that is racist because it's never been directed towards people with white skin.
Yeah.
And Trump is already talking about trying to denaturalize Zohran and deport Zohran because he grew up in Uganda. And it's like, paired with this Islamophobia that has been really convenient for the people beating the war drums for Iran. People were putting burqas over the Statue of Liberty using AI tools and posting it on social media, saying that voting for Mamdani is voting for 9/11 again, and that New York must have forgot. The level of anti-Muslim racism, Middle Eastern racism is at an all-time high. The anti-Arabic racism that we saw after 9/11. It's like history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And as we're escalating tensions with Iran, we're being extremely racist as a country. I don't know why I'm saying we. It's like idiots like Nancy Mace on social media and fucking Ted Cruz. But they are being just so insane right now. And I think a part of it is because that kind of alienation and seeing this group of people as less than human is necessary for them to get consent to do more war in the Middle East. And I was going through TSA. I told this story to John. It's going to take some backstory, right? So Bush, what he did was precisely what the administration's doing now in saying, we believe that Iraq is developing a weapon of mass destruction because we have evidence. Yeah, right? We have evidence that they have yellow cake, high quality uranium that they bought from Niger, they bought from Africa. And of course, Dave Chappelle did this skit about yellow cake and was like eating it afterwards. Very funny. So I'm going through TSA on my way to the East Coast. I have all this cornbread in my backpack because I always travel with snacks. And TSA flags my bag. They're going through it. And I make this joke to my boyfriend. I'm like, it's all my yellow cake from Africa, as he's like taking out bags of cornbread.
The call is coming from inside of Jessica Burbank's travel on.
And I was just like, oh my God. And then the TSA guy goes, so you got a lot of food items? And I'm like, why are we policifying my cornbread? Just saying,
is that a crime, sir?
Yeah, you have snacks to fly with? Yeah, because airport food is like 2 times more expensive. I travel with food. Anyway, so that was funny.
You got a bag of cornbread. What's it to you?
Yeah. What do you think? It's from Niger? It's not. This is not for my friends in Iran.
A highly enriched cornbread. Yeah, I feel like we glossed over the fact of you just traveling with a large quantity of cornbread, which is a boss move.
Yeah, it's really crummy, but if you have it in like a Ziploc baggie and you just stick your mouth into the Ziploc to take a bite,
uranium.
Easy to eat on an airplane. So, yeah.
Nice.
The crumbs stay in the bag, and then once you're down to just crumbs, you can just squish them together in the bag, and then you have more to eat.
Let me tell you what, you go to an airport vendor, get a cup of chili, dump it in that bag. Ever think of that?
We travel a lot for our work, so I think we could do like an entire episode on travel hacks.
Yeah. You're allowed to have, as long as you have under 3.5 ounces of liquid chili cornbread mixture, you should be good.
Yeah, exactly. Is that me or you?
What's the time for?
That's me. I don't know. It's a phone call. But I don't know who this is. It
TSA.
could be. I think it's for a speeding ticket I got in New York a long time ago.
That's awesome. I haven't paid a $700 bill from my health insurer, and I just ignore any calls about it.
Yeah. Insurance should be free. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so the United Nations found that the reports of the yellow cake uranium were not real. And,
nailed it.
Duh. And it's interesting because right now Trump is like, oh, we targeted the, weapons facility where Iran was developing the nuclear bombs, whatever, successful. And now there's reports coming out of like independent examiners saying that like we didn't actually damage the nuclear stuff they were making. It's just so crazy. And here's what I'll say. It's something that I've heard before, but worth saying again. If nuclear weapons are held by the United States of America, because we need deterrence, because we're so hated, we could talk about that in a second, but we need deterrence from other people nuking us. wouldn't Iran just want that same defense that we have? Like, why is the assumption that they're developing it to be aggressive, but when we develop nuclear weapons and put military stations all around the world, we're just doing it because we need to be protected. We're just really good guys and people hate us because we have so much freedom. It's just like, logically, it's so basic and weak and boring. It's like, come up with a more interesting story to drag us into war in the Middle East. This time we've heard this one already. Like, really,
This is for
it's
your own
insulting.
good. This is good for both of us. For our audio listeners, I'm pointing both of my finger guns right at the camera, as if I'm America building 800 military bases and amassing nukes all over the world while saying it's about peace. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. You know, the no war guy did war. just one more war in the Middle East, bro, please, I promise. You know, I think the thing to me, there's like a million takes that have flown around, like you said, on the internet about this, but I just think we're also going to get into the BBL, the big beautiful legislation, the big ugly bill, whatever you want to call it. But the thing has the first, $1 trillion defense proposal in there. At that level, it's just an incomprehensible amount of money that is going to these idiots who, 20 years after we did 20 years of war based on weapons of mass destruction, like right after that are like just running it back again. And that's happening at the same time that defense contractor CEOs are openly salivating on like news programs about how we're moving into a wartime footing, and it's never been better for the profit projections of companies that make terrible shit that cause genocide to pop up on your screen in unavoidable ways. They go hand in glove, and I think this is also a moment, like if there's any part of you that's looking at Donald Trump as an anti-establishment figure and saying like, we do need that. This is the moment to realize that there are folks who lie about being anti-establishment. Donald Trump is one of them. Okay, the people who are offering the real anti-establishment stuff are people like Zohran Mamdani, like the Fight the Oligarchy tour, the people who are pointing out this feeding frenzy by defense contractors who are sticking their nose in the trough of a, for the first time ever, $1 trillion defense budget that is being passed by all these guys who claim to be representing the working class, who are starting conflicts that the working class will fight once again, just like they do every time working people go in to fight a rich man's war. And in addition to all the takes we've seen flying around about Iran, I think it's important to remember that big picture one. History rhymes.
Right. And how, like, the weird domino effect, you always see this meme of like the tiny domino falling over and then like where we are now, and it's just such a bigger problem. But not for nothing, cooing, I believe one of the first Mohammed Mossadegh, back way back when it was like what 59 or 60, that the United States just cooed that guy because he was nationalizing petroleum. Like, it was the Anglo-Iranian Petroleum Company because the Brits were in there as colonizers. And it's like, when you say, hey, actually, I think the natural resources of my country belong to the people who live here within the country's borders, it shouldn't be controversial as a world leader. But of course, to the CIA, that was a huge threat to their global capital, their cash flow, their power, and they cooed that guy. And it's like, now we see all these memes. Oh, look at Iran before the Islamic Revolution. We were responsible for finding a guy who was a religious extremist to become the new leader because he was cool, with the United States helping him get power in exchange for like letting the hands of Anglo imperialism remain in control of the natural resources there. So it's just like, now we've created a scenario where, yes, Iran doesn't like us so much, but whose fault is that? And not for nothing, Iran's an extremely old country, one that's been around for, more than centuries, thousands of years. And the idea that the United States is like the greatest country ever to exist is this laughable joke to Iranians because we're this baby country and they literally make plans in centuries. So the idea of war with Iran is so crazy stupid. it would be one of the biggest mistakes any president has ever made. And I think Trump is dumb enough to do it, and that really scares me.
Yeah. Yeah, no qualms there, nothing to add. It's like
Yeah.
these, same with China. These dynasties have been around for 5,000 years. They think in 5,000-year terms. We're 200 and whatever years old. Coming up on the big 3-0. Will we get there? I don't know. And the fact is, those societies are electing their leaders in their way, and our society has put in charge of us a reality TV guy who remembers the last thing people said to him and kind of makes decisions based on vindication and extremely short-sighted stuff. So, the guy to be having around for wars? I don't know. Also,
That's interesting.
Don't really trust Pete Hegseth on the same terms.
To say that, like, Trump is the guy that's put in charge of us is so fascinating. It just has me thinking, like, the president is the ruling class's selected babysitter of the American people.
Yeah, pretty much. They're like, hey, do you want to talk to these idiots so they don't stab us with pitchforks? Which is really his job.
You like this guy? He'll tell you about what we're doing.
Here, jingle the keys in front of these people.
Yeah, for real.
And you know what? That's a point. I don't know if it belongs in what we're talking about now, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's like and this especially goes for, like, if you consider yourself liberal and you get annoyed with leftists, an important thing to remember here is Donald Trump is that these problems are not because of Donald Trump. He makes them much, much worse. But these problems don't go away when we get rid of Donald Trump. These problems are because we have a billionaire class that profits from war that controls every aspect of our government and economy. When Trump goes away, they will still be in power. And they've been in power over Democratic administrations, over Republican administrations, not just recently, but for, going back to Eisenhower and the military-industrial complex. The real problem here, for as much as Trump commands attention, everything in the news has its roots in the fact that we have incredible wealth accumulation at the top, where a small group of people small enough to fit into a hotel room are directing, our government in ways that benefit them only. And that's what we have to focus on. Donald Trump has got to go, but we really need to roll back the power of billionaires.
Right. Yeah, totally. I think there's weird saviors right now, like Tucker Carlson is being looked to as this uniquely anti-intervention, anti-war figure. Now he's saying, oh, Fox News is just propaganda. I'm sorry, you were there for 13 years? At what point did we realize this, Tucker? And so I saw this meme. I can't believe I found this out from a meme. I'm so pissed off I didn't look into his internal or his family history on my own. But I saw this meme that was like listing off all these right-wing commentators and how so many of them have parents in the security state and CIA. Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, one of the major ones. And they're like, you really think these are the folks that are going to drain the swamp and the deep state? And then I looked at his Wikipedia page. First of all, I'll say you can have different views to your parents or whatever. However, his dad has an insane background. He ran in recently, 2003, right? So we're just scrolling his father's Wikipedia page. In 2003, he worked as, like, the vice chairman of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a counterterrorism institute in DC and Brussels, Belgium. From 92 to 97, he was the president of a Russian state-owned global research consulting firm, which conducts opinion surveys for government agencies in 75 countries.
Tucker Carlson's dad.
Like, recently was the chair of it. In 2021, Tucker Carlson's dad was on the board of directors of Policy Impact, a lobbying firm that has been known to lobby the U.S. on behalf of Viktor Orban, the government in Hungary.
Jesus
Like,
Christ.
is it a coincidence that CPAC was held in Hungary? I think Tucker and his dad might be pretty close, if I'm being honest.
I did not know this about, this falls in again into the bucket of things that are not surprising to find out and still terrifying. I mean, It's never been a better time to lose trust in the people who are whispering at you to be mad at somebody else, because while you're being mad at the people they're whispering for you to be mad at, their dads are out there cutting deals with Viktor Orban, right? Who is like kind of the pilot program for the United States in its current direction, right?
True. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, no. Yes. That's very accurate. There are the same people who are from Hungary, billionaires like Thomas Peterffy, who came in and donated a ton of money to Ron DeSantis for the Don't Say Gay bill. It was like a bill that mirrored existing legislation in Hungary. So like what you said is already happening.
I mean, Sepp Gorka, these weird bottom dweller.
It sounds like a Star Wars character.
Yeah, Sepp Gorka. What the fuck? Still haven't watched Star Wars.
God damn it, John.
But Sepp Gorka, go dig into his Wikipedia page. Plenty of connections to Hungary. Now, in charge of our counterterrorism apparatus. In charge of the AI-powered, Palantir-aligned security state designed to repress dissent in America. And comes right out of Hungary, just like Tucker Carlson's dad's connection to that place as well. The bromance between Donald Trump and Viktor Orban. All of this shit adds together, and the running theme is that these people want you to be obsessed with anything but those connections, and they constantly tell you who to be mad at and how the real problem is bathrooms, and in the background, they're handing the machinery of this country over to the wealthy elite who are instigating these wars, profiting about it, talking about that openly on the news, and taking their notes from two-bit dictators in Hungary.
It's not good. It's not looking good, the direction our country's going. The circumstances are horrible. You can't afford a home. You can't afford rent in most cases on median wages in America. It looks like we're going to be dragged into yet another war. We've had multiple financial crises. And it reminds me of this quote, John.
Oh, yes. What was that quote?
Yeah. So it's strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men create hard times create strong men, so on and so forth. Yeah. Kind of feels like we are living in some hard times compared to previous generations where you could buy a house on a single income and provide for your family. Where the economy was doing pretty well, where the quality of clothing in the stores were pretty good, where you weren't working most of your waking hours in multiple jobs just to get by in America, and you could pay your way through college on a minimum wage job as well. It just feels like those times were a little bit easy and potentially created some weak men that created some hard times for us. I am talking about boomers who always use this quote to say, "Oh, you young people have it so easy with your phones and your internet," as if we're not living through unprecedented storms and inheriting a world where the economy is entirely rigged for the ruling class. It's just like, you guys left us a world that's not so good. And I will say it's not all boomers. I have my closest friend in Iowa is a boomer, and she always talks about how she feels horrible what her generation is handing down. There are some really cool, really dope boomers out there. Not all boomers, but always a boomer saying
Not
you kids
boomers
have it so easy.
Yeah, it feels like we're really at this like crazy handover where like the last generation to have it best, the boomers. I think if you're a white boomer, man, you peaked in society. That was like on a global historical scale to be a white boomer in America. That was some good times, and now they're kind of passing that over to a generation that is like, should I buy body armor? Like it appears that we are not only, headed into climate doom, but we are smashing the gas. There's this crazy unhinged wealth accumulation happening at the very top, and the only people who are, capable or occupying a position to do anything about it are might as well be sucking a lollipop while insisting on dying in that position of power. And
Mhm.
that kind of feels like like it describes the gap between boomers and millennials and Gen Z. And I just kind of watch this and I'm like, a lot of the times in these discussions, they'll wrap up with, well, we really hope that the youth will save us. The kids will save us. We're rooting for you guys. But it's like, we'll take help.
Mhm.
We accept help from you. And,
Yeah.
it's not too late to kind of change your mind about the way reality is and to kind of join us.
Yeah, we
Because
need every boomer on board.
we need every boomer on. No boomer left behind. As long as we're dredging up things from the mid 2000s,
Mhm.
no boomer left behind in the revolution.
Yeah. Yeah, facts. I mean, my parents are such cool people. I think they're technically boomers if they're born in 1960, but whatever. They're cool. Like, they're down with the politics. I remember as soon as I explained, like, the ruling class isn't so good to my parents, my dad was like, yeah, but my mom, it was kind of new ideas. And now she rants to me and I'm like, who are you? She's just like
Yeah.
in it, She's anti-corporate. She hates the ruling
Yeah.
class. It's like really cool to just like hang out with my parents and not have that divide that I felt like we had when I was kind of a kid. I wasn't into politics. My mom was like kind of conservative, but it's cool now that we can hang out and talk about it. And my dad like shows his coworkers my Christy Nome videos, which I will say
I was gonna ask how your dad feels about Gator Traz, Jessica. Can you tell us what's up with that?
it was actually like he's into it. He was like, "What if you got like a gator blow up and like you did a Christy
Yeah.
Nome video about alligator Alcatraz?" So shout out to Dad for the idea. He was behind my most
Let's go,
recent
Dad.
skit. Which required for a period of time me to go crazy looking for a mullet for my Russian alligator Alcatraz worker character.
You should have called. How did
I
you
I
get one?
know. This is quite the story. So I'm in like rural North Carolina looking for a wig far from Halloween. Not a lot of options. Calling everywhere. People don't have wigs. One place did. Nighttime secrets. Okay. They were
That
a
was the
ways
name of the
away.
store?
Yes, yes, it was a sex shop, John.
Ah, there it
They said
is.
something like, "We
There it
fulfill every
is.
fantasy" on the sign, and so I call them, I'm like, "You guys got
Uh-huh.
wigs?" They're like, "We have wigs." I'm like, "Thank nobody has wigs, man." And they're like, "What are you looking for?" I say, "I really want to find a mullet wig."
Yeah. Hell yeah.
They're like, "Okay, well, we have, like, bobs and stuff." I'm like, "Well, maybe I can trim it up to look like a mullet." So I get in there into the sex shop looking for a mullet. I didn't give them any more details.
We've all been there, Jessica. It's okay.
So I walk in and a person who was definitely not who I spoke to on the phone, totally different voice. I was like, "Yeah, I'm looking for a wig." She goes, "Oh, like a mullet, right? You called?" And I was like, you just know the coworkers had a conversation
Yeah,
afterwards.
they
Like,
were
this
talking
girl
about
just
that in the
called
break
looking
room.
for a mullet wig. Don't kink shame, respect what people are into. They were very cool about it. They made me feel very comfortable looking for my mullet in the sex shop, but nothing looked cuttable, so I ended up using a fuzzy pillow from Dollar General that I cut apart to make the mullet. Anyway,
Recession core.
yeah, I think that alligator Alcatraz, when I first heard of it, I thought it was an Onion type article. It was not a parody. It's real that they are creating a
Incredible.
detention center, for-profit detention center that cost $450 million to create, according to Ms. Nome. That money was taken from FEMA's Shelter and Services Program, which is a branch of FEMA, the disaster relief agency that provides shelter but has partial DHS control because they provide shelter, not prison cells, shelter for people who have been freed from border patrol, who are, asylum seeking in the United States. And so to use those funds for a detention center is a major departure from what those funds were originally intended for. Is it legal what they're doing? I'm not entirely sure. It seems suspicious, highly suspicious. I have sources within FEMA saying this is actually a part of a larger grant program that they're referring to internally as the ICE grant. It is so new that there's not even an official notice of funding operations. So we can't really see what states are going to be receiving funding for ICE operations coming from FEMA under this program. But all we know is it's between $600 and $650 million. And the funding seemingly is following the same cash flow that Noam described last week, talking about Alligator Alcatraz.
Makes total sense. This and this is what they mean when they cut FEMA and say we're going to leave disaster relief up to the states. What do they mean by that? They mean they're going to build gator traps. We are in Florida, a place that knows hurricanes. We are going to get rid of FEMA, leave that up to the states. And if the states want to build a detention center for migrants that are kidnapped by masked men, who knows if they're impersonators or not at this point, off of the streets with no due process, we're just going to build a detention center for them that's for profit, owned by these people who benefit from more kidnappings off the street in the middle of a swamp. Am I surprised? I guess not. Am I sick of this garbage? Oh yeah. I just imagine it's like so many things in our timeline right now would just be ridiculous to explain to an alien that landed here, about what's going on Earth. It's like, oh, hey, we're investing more money into the thing that is causing an existential threat to our existence, climate change. And in the place where that is most acute, where hurricanes hit, we're getting rid of the disaster relief agency, and instead we're going to spend that money on building a detention center in a swamp, and that detention center is going to benefit the bottom lines of the corporations who control our basic government, even though we say that we are a democracy. And this is all normal. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Yeah. Meanwhile, as this is going on, this absolute craziness, they are passing the Big Beautiful Bill in the Senate, the BBL, Big Beautiful Legislation. Tom
Yes.
Tillis, my North Carolina senator, I guess I vote in Iowa now, so I can't claim Tom, my parents' senator, said he's not voting for the bill. He can't support it. North Carolina is one of those states where a lot of people are insured by Medicaid to the tune of over 600,000 people. I think we're the second highest behind Florida, who rely on this insurance. And him voting for it would be political suicide, but I don't think that's what it was about, because right after saying he wasn't supporting the bill, he said he's not running for office again. That's a lot of courage. My father was one of the people that was calling his office saying, do not vote for this bill that is just giving money to billionaires and taking necessary resources working people worked for away from them. And then after, he came out and said he was going to vote against the bill, my dad called him and was like, thank you for the courage, which is just really cute. I appreciate that story from my father. But I'm going to be messy for a second, John. So I've seen chatter about who is considering running against Mr. Tillis.
Yes.
I didn't know this was a North Carolinian. Jolly Green or Jolly something Ginger. Do you know this person?
Oh, yeah, I do know that guy.
Personally?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw him.
What do you think of him?
I saw him at the Creator Lounge of the DNC when I spoke there, which was the most sociopathic room I've ever been in. And that is really saying something, because I worked at a decently high level in politics.
Yes, perfect. So I went to Trending Up, which is like creators are invited. There's progressives and establishment. Everybody's mixed together. There's like lefties that all hang out together. That would be my friend group. And so it's a bit of a weird situation when you get those people together who don't see the world exactly the same way, right?
Oh, yeah.
So Mr. Jolly is leaving the bar at the same time as me and my friends. Yeah. I don't drink anymore, so I'm totally sober, just in a good mood, goofing off with the boys. Now, I had just gotten, this is important context, I had just gotten my color analysis done to where like blues and purples and cool tones and stuff. I'm walking into the bar in an outfit that is all my color analysis. The bouncer tells my friend, Ricky, that he can put his water bottle that's not allowed to be in the bar right behind him in the bush. He'll save it for him for when he's leaving. Just like so chill and cool. And then he says, I love your outfit so much. Those are such great, like, colors. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's the best. We're talking about how cool and chill the bouncer is.
Yes.
As we leave the bar, Jolly's trying to take out, like, alcohol. And it's just common knowledge. You don't take alcohol out of the bar.
True.
I will also say it's not lost on me that the bouncer was a black man from the DMV area.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey man, like, you can't have beer or whatever. They start, like, kind of like talking back. Jolly starts talking back and is like, I didn't see this part. My friend saw this part. I only saw the aftermath and I didn't know who it was about. But Jolly's walking all pissed off. And he's like, man, I really don't like that guy. And he's like, so angry. And I go, yeah, I don't like that guy either. Just like, so stupid. Because I'm not thinking he's like genuinely angry, like leaving the bar with everyone. Turns out he really was. And he shot a look back at me like he was gonna hurt me. Like he was angry. And I was like, holy shit, like, why is he so mad? And me and my friends just look back at him like, dude, it's not that fucking serious. Like, I just say stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I got filled in later that he was beefing with the bouncer who was a literal angel from heaven. And I'm sorry, but anyone who treats like service workers, especially ones that are nice, mean, it just makes me think differently about who they are as a person.
Yeah.
So I immediately soured on this person that I didn't know or talk to. Maybe he was really drunk and it was out of character. I don't know. If you know Jolly, let me know if I have a misread. But I will not be getting behind that campaign for Senate until I figure out what's going on.
Get to the bottom of this shit.
Until that bouncer gets a personal apology from Jolly,
exactly.
I will
Put him
not
on the
support.
security squad.
That was such an unnecessary story, but whatever.
we don't fucking with service industry people. As to service industry people of the past.
Yeah, can't do it.
Yeah, that was all about Tom Tillis, you know. That was all about Tom Tillis, a man who pulled the Richard Nixon of, you know, just throwing up the deuces, getting the fuck out of there when it gets pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how that primary develops, but I mean, you know, to put a bookend on that, I think it's just another piece of evidence that there's no room to be a Republican now if you're going against Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
This guy goes against him on the big beautiful legislation, and is getting the hell out of town. You know, a bunch of takes are flying around. This legislation obviously is horrible. There was another show where we kind of went through what was going on there. This is one of the largest transfers of wealth to the 1% that's ever happened, which is really saying something because we're in a decades-long habit of just shoveling all of our money up to a tiny group of people at the top. It's beating even the first Trump tax bill this time around, which, by the way, in this legislation was extended. I think it's important, though, to just keep the eye on the big picture with this legislation, which is, I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face on the show, but just the difference between 1 million and 1 billion. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 32 years. We have 800 multi-billionaires. We have a dozen billionaires with hundreds of billions of dollars. It is actually a level of wealth accumulation that is hard to wrap your brain around. The level of upward wealth transfer in this bill makes the people with hundreds of billions look insignificant. That's how big this transfer is. And this is at a time when those people with such an amount of wealth are so firmly behind the agenda. They're in front of the members of Congress back during the inauguration. They're waving around PricewaterhouseCoopers style giant cartoon checks in actual elections. And this is their bill. You know, they set the agenda, they push around the influence, they get what they want. They did, it passed. And it goes back to the point I was saying earlier that this is nothing different from Democratic administrations over the last couple of years. I mean, these people have gone from single digit billions in the 2010s to triple digit billions today. That spans Obama, Biden, and Trump administrations. And here they are just, consolidating their power. And that's why this is much more problems. Everything that we talk about on the show is much more related to this class of oligarchs, this unaccountable, unelected class of billionaires than it is to Donald Trump, even though he is the best example of distracting everybody enough for them to pull off this robbery in plain sight. So yeah, we got to get rid of him, but we have to really roll back these billionaires who have just added another massive win into their column with this big, beautiful legislation. It sucks, Jessica. And, I hope they find somebody to replace Tom Tillis that is nice to service workers.
I think the interesting part about the bill's reaction on social media for me, and by the way, if you haven't seen the episode we did on the big, beautiful legislation, I think we called it Trump's BBL. But I got so many comments like, oh, you hate on billionaires because you're jealous, you don't work hard, and you don't have that much money. Has nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. Because as you just described, like, that difference in like $1 million versus $1 billion, it's an unnecessary amount of wealth. You can't buy more stuff that you need. You can't direct that capital in a way that makes the world a better place as one person. You just don't have the time. And I think we can imagine wealth disparity in this way. If all of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of those guys, they have all of the dollars, it means we have less. But that manifests through they're spending the money on yachts, they're spending the money on multiple houses, they're spending the money in investments in Silicon Valley bros startups because they think they can get more power if they have their claws in AI and technology. It really is about the accumulation of power. That's what they're spending their money on. Whereas if that wealth was able to stay more in the hands of regular people, they would be spending it on healthcare and food and their survival and actually having a life where they're not constantly struggling. And like, because billionaires are playing around with their money in that way, we are kept struggling. That's the effect of wealth inequality. That's why it's important. And it's not really about the dollars or the being rich or being jealous of rich guys. It's really about the moral, like, argument that you shouldn't be able to pull resources people need for survival away from them for your extra shit. That's it.
I'm willing to get into it with the bros that love rich dudes. Like, sure, I'll be a capitalist up until $100 million. But like, once you pass, $100 million is a shit ton of money, and I think once you get to that point, you have offered society all possible good, in air quotes, that being one rich person could possibly give back to society. And past that point, you're just corrupting government with your pile of money. That you have so much money that you are able to continuously influence government in a way that is directly opposed to the words written in the Constitution of by and for the people. Once you get past that level of wealth, you have a guy who's like single-handedly buying off Clarence Thomas. That guy's not even a billionaire. He's got like $500 million and he's paying for multiple trips for Supreme Court justices. He's getting legislation in favorable rulings in proportion to these gifts. That person is not even on the scale of the household billionaires that we know. And you're just past that point of wealth, there's nothing good that you can do for society. And I feel like you should get a trophy. You won capitalism. Go rest on the beach and leave us the fuck alone. and return that money back to the people who went into work to make it enter into existence. Why is that a crazy idea? It's like more and more you can look around and you don't need the weatherman to tell you. It's like you go into work and somebody else gets rich. I think we should have a different system, and that has nothing to do with being jealous about money. Make it. Small business is great. I come from a small business family. You can do that. we're not talking, you're not a billionaire.
Yeah,
There's gray areas.
yeah, it's like the way I see it right now is there are some people who believe that they are above others, that there is not equality, that there are some human beings that are better than others, and I think people who think like that are sick and a threat to the human race. And that's how a lot of
Fair.
these troligarchs feel.
Oh, you're just jealous,
So,
Jessica.
yeah, I'm just jealous. Well, it's good to be back in your ear balls, JJ
Yeah,
Nash.
we're all
We
up in
miss
your
you.
balls. Feels good. Miss you. I think we're gonna get regular, but that all depends on the schedule of climate disasters caused by billionaires, right, guys?
Yeah. So maybe we'll see you soon. Let's hope we'll see you soon. And there's an absence of those disasters in our lives and yours.
Start those mutual aid networks, JJ Nash, and let us know how it goes. And until then, we'll catch you later.